So I'm going to hit record. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Mosaic Podcast. I am so excited. She doesn't even know it, but she is one of my heroes. A long time ago she didn't even know. A long time ago, when I was thinking of starting this trip to travel around the world and listen to the voice of the voiceless, when my book, The Mosaic, told me after I finished writing it, I want you to do what your main character did. I want you to be like Mo and travel around the world and listen, talk to people, listen to people, hear what they have to say. I was dumbfounded because I had no idea how I was going to do that. I had always been somebody who had been very particular about the restaurants that I would go to, the people that I would hang out with. I wanted them to be a certain level of refinement, a certain vibration of spirituality. And yet the book that I wrote about was about the homeless man and the trash man and the gardener and the street worker and the blind woman. And it was telling me now it wanted me to go out and meet those people. So somewhere along the line, I bumped into Traci Ruble. And Traci Ruble, I never met her. I actually contacted her organization, and I just found out as we were talking here in the green room that she had moved from where she was to Germany. And I probably contacted her right in those moments where everything sort of falls into the crevices. But imagine my delight when they reached out to me and said, we want to be on your podcast. And I said, absolutely. She's one of my heroes. Let me tell you a little bit about this woman that I'm going to meet with you really for the first time today too. But I've known of her for a while. Traci Ruble is a relationship expert. She's been working with individuals and couples for over 16 years in California and has been featured in Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, ABC, CBS, and NPR. She's currently working on her first book on intimacy at home and at work. That isn't how I heard of her. This is how I heard of her now. Traci also founded and leads a global human connection project called Sidewalk Talk, where over 7,000 listeners sit on sidewalks in over 92 locations across 15 countries, offering to listen about anything and heal our lonely and divided world. Sidewalk Talk was recently featured in Oprah Magazine. To learn more about her, go to www.sidewalk-talk.org or www.traci-ruble.com. Those links would be in the show notes. You don't have to write them down now. Really, to learn more about her, just listen to this podcast. Traci, welcome to the Mosaic Podcast. What an honor to have you here with me.
Thanks, Dan. I get to good old-fashioned connection today. Hey.
Yeah. And
I'm excited to be in connection with you.
Me too, more than you can know. And I'm hearing a little bit of disconnection through our internet. If you bear with us, she's in Germany. It's late at night while I'm in San Diego. We have something going on here in the world called coronavirus, where all the internet providers are slowing down their services because so many people are using it. So if you don't hear us, if it's a little bubbly, stay with us, okay? Traci, I'm always interested to find out the environment that people grew up in. What did your parents do?
Say that again, Danny.
I'm always interested to find out the environment that brought people into this world. What did your parents do when you were growing up?
Well, I think we need to back up before even what they did.
Okay.
I have, a wound story that a lot of therapists have. I'm a psychotherapist, and you don't usually become a psychotherapist unless you had some bad stuff happen, because usually the bad stuff is what helps you empathize with people, right?
Yeah.
And I had a teen mom, and she was very vocal after I was born that she did not want to have me, and that I was not a wanted kid. I had never met my biological father until I was 26. Met him one time, and she was married 6 times. So my young life was pretty interesting, to say the least. I've spent about 25 years on a therapist couch. When you're a therapist, you're kind of in therapy for the rest of your life anyway, because your own clients bring up your stuff.
Absolutely.
Um, but a real sense of empathy for outsiders, right? Because even in my own home, I felt like an outsider, right? And it's funny when I tell people this story because outwardly I have this appearance. I'm blonde, blue eyed. I like to wear suit jackets. And so people will assume that they'll assume all kinds of things about any of us. We all do
Yeah.
that. But your appearance, sometimes people will stereotype me. And then when I tell them my story, they're like, God, that's not the story I thought you would have had.
Yes.
So, but coming up, it was a mixed bag. For half my life, my family was pretty fundamentally religious, and for half my life, when the uptick in divorces were happening, we were my brother and I were kind of feral animals, kind
Wow.
of parenting
Wow.
ourselves.
Wow.
Is kind of how it went.
So one of the things that I really like, and people who have been listening to the podcast will know this, is the level of honesty and the level of intimacy that people somehow feel comfortable on this podcast sharing. And
Hmm.
I want to thank you for your honesty, because looking at you, who would assume that that would be the background that you grew up in? But
Hmm.
I love that that was the background that you grew up in, because one of the key points that I always want to say to people is that where we are now is exactly that. It's where we are now. It doesn't mean
Hmm.
it's where we'll
Hmm.
be in 1 second from now, because we're
That's
one.
right.
The beautiful thing about a mosaic is we're one connection away from an entirely different life, one piece away from seeing a whole new
That's right.
part of it. So for you, what was the thing that 80% of the people that grew up that way would not have ended up the way you ended up? So what was the thing? What was that piece? If you can clarify it.
You mean that sort of lifted me out of maybe something more negative that could have happened to me?
Absolutely.
I was good at making family.
Wow.
you know, so when I was a young girl in elementary school, and I'm still friends with Elisa to this day, I found a great family and I just hung out with them all the time. And then when I
Wow.
was an adolescent and I was struggling, I had Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner with my best friend in for many, many years, from ages 13 to 17. Which is a lot of years when those are all your
Right.
teenage years,
Right.
pretty much. So it
Yeah.
doesn't seem like a lot now, but that was it. And I'm still friends with her and her family. Her mother has since passed away. Um, and then I met my husband, and I married into my dream family. So I
Wow.
seem to always find my way to, I found family. And I'll tell you, it was so important for me.
Yeah. I love that. And I'd love to also lob something across the net for you
Yeah.
to see just what you feel, because so often we don't understand quite how we've done it, but we sort of fall into these great situations and we
Hmm.
meet just the right people. And there's a
Hmm.
part of me that wants to say and believe that what if that wasn't anything that we did, that life was just there offering us all of these possibilities if we were clean enough and empty enough to just receive it. And part of the emptiness
Hmm.
that you experienced in growing up the way you did, without a mom who wanted you and without a dad that you even knew, allowed you the capability to, when something new came in, to receive it and become and have that fill you up.
Yeah.
Would that be something you would consider possible?
Yeah, I think so. I think I have a pretty good nose for people that I can trust and who are loyal. It also means that I don't have a lot of tolerance for people that aren't.
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, I tend to be a good friend picker, and you know, I I have some friends that I've been friends with for over 20 years.
I love that. I love that. So when you look back now at the life that brought you to where you are now, and also the therapist, but what I'm really interested in for this podcast is your Sidewalk Talk life.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
this organization that you created that is in 15 countries, 7,000 people strong. Um, it sort of starts to make sense. Did you feel listened to as a kid?
Oh, heck to the no.
Heck to the no.
No, we had this terrible thing in my house. My mom always used to tell. So here, I have a child. So I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. And one of my sons, I'm pretty sure, is exactly like I was as a kid. So I have a lot more empathy for my mom because I think I was a bit of a pain in the ass in a way, because I was super intellectual and I had really deep thoughts long before most kids are thinking the things that I was thinking. And I think I was one of those kids that would ask the annoying, well, how come this happens, Mom? And how come this? And why that? And why, can you explain to me why this? And I just think I never shut up on some level.
Yeah.
So I want to say with a caveat that I don't know that I was always the easiest person to listen to, because
Yes.
I wanted to just engage all the freaking time. And I now I now have one of those living in my house. I mean,
Yeah.
I have this lovely, beautiful, smarty pants guy that thinks about racial injustice and poverty and the the environment, and he wants to talk about these things at 12 years old all the time.
Wow.
But I will say that the listening skills were poor. And one of the things that my mom would say is she goes, oh, there goes Traci again with diarrhea of the mouth,
Oh,
was
wow.
the shorthand used in my house. So it was actually really in the foreground for me and for in my family, because I was name called for it,
Wow.
truth be told.
So I want to just sidestep a minute because I have the honor of having a 30-year-old developmentally delayed daughter. And she doesn't speak like you and I speak. She speaks
Mm,
as if someone who's had a stroke, and she's virtually ununderstandable. Most people
mm,
cannot understand what she says. She's getting a little bit better now over the course of time. She's getting a little bit better, but being her dad and being with her all the time, we just had a way that most of the time I would understand, even when nobody else would understand her. I would get an
mm,
idea. And we weren't talking about Descartes and Kant and, philosophy. We were talking about what does she need right now.
mm-hmm,
But sometimes I didn't.
mm-hmm,
And when I didn't understand, what she would do is she would yell and scream.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And when
Good for
she,
her.
yeah, and when she yelled and screamed, to her credit, sometimes it actually caused her to pronounce her words a little bit differently. And I would catch something different than what she said, and I would get it because she spoke louder and she enunciated different. But most
Yeah.
of the time, it wasn't because of the volume of what she was saying; it was because of the clarity.
Mm-hmm,
And so when
mm-hmm,
she yelled and I still didn't get it, she would throw a tantrum.
mm-hmm.
And that just made things even, like, it made it even harder to understand her. But I know she wanted to be understood. So I would say, Lisa, I really want to understand you. What are you trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
When her tantrum didn't work, she would run and attack me. She would come and run at me and either try and bite me or rip my shirt or do something. And this went on for a long time. It went on for 15 years, sometimes as
Wow.
many as 15 times a day.
Wow.
And I think I'm sort of a smart guy, but I guess I wasn't all that smart until this moment that I realized I could sit her down, and in the midst of her rage, I said to her, Alisa, we got to find another way.
Mm,
Can you talk to me without your words?
mm-hmm,
And from the midst of her rage, she said, beautiful smile, I am, Dad. Perfect
mm,
English.
mm-hmm,
I said, what the heck do you mean you are? Tell me what you're doing. And she took her finger and put it to the side of her head and pointed to the side of her head. And I understood from that she was putting thoughts in my head. That because
mm,
she didn't have the ability to speak, she had the ability to transfer thoughts. And I
mm,
had felt that she was doing that. I just didn't trust it.
mm.
So I said, you little son of a gun, you're putting thoughts in my head, aren't you? And she started to laugh. And she went, yes, Daddy, yes. And we laughed. It felt like for 2 or 3 months. It was probably only 2 or 3 minutes, but it was that contagious laugh that when she stopped, I was still going, and it made her laugh more, and vice versa.
Mm, hmm,
One of the things that I realized is that everybody I work with, everybody I know, everybody I see is exactly like my daughter.
mm,
When they speak and they don't get heard, they yell. When they
mhm,
yell and they don't get heard, they create a scene. And when they create a scene and they don't get heard, they try and destroy something. That could be a building. It could be a relationship. It could be a family. It could be taking a gun and shooting down people that you don't even know.
mhm,
And what I realized is when we retrofit it back, it all comes back to listening. and
Mm-hmm.
figuring out a way to listen.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So, what would you say that you were trying to say that you got accused of diarrhea of the mouth? Or what would you, even more importantly now, because you didn't have diarrhea of the mouth, you just wanted to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say your son is trying to say?
Yeah.
If you
Oh,
could
yeah.
really
This is
listen.
easy. Super easy. Um, the feelings that I'm holding are way too big for me to hold all by myself.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so what did you do with that?
What did I do with that? Mm. Well, I think I always had a I was athletic. So I started running. I don't think I started running, but I had a BMX bike, and
Right.
I just loved that feeling of riding up hills and going on the BMX track with the boys till my about being embodied and sort of exhausting my physiology that helped me.
Yeah.
And then I started running, and running felt like church.
Wow.
Um, and I just did it for fun, and then it became competitive. I still run to this day. Running's different now. I don't run as fast, but I always run in the forest, in the trees. I don't ever run on pavement.
Yeah.
So it's as much about being in nature as it is about letting my thighs burn. But it felt like a kind of spirituality in a way, a moving spirituality. And it was the only way I could kind of offload some of that stress and pressure.
Wow. When you ran competitively, did it still feel like church?
Yeah. I mean, it did because it was still fun. When I started to get really good, and then you'd get college scholarship offers, and then suddenly there was the pressure to perform, not so much. I hated it.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So what changed in that moment where it was a church-like experience to I have to perform and I have to fit into the standards that these people are saying to me?
It's so funny that I'm kind of proud of myself right now because I completely know the answer to this. It was no longer mine. It
Wow.
belonged to somebody else. And because the minute that somebody said, you have to do it this way or this has to be the outcome, it no longer was my possession,
Wow.
you know?
Wow.
But thankfully, I had such amazing coaches for such a long time. And frankly, great people on my track and cross country teams. I'm still very, very close to some of the members of my high school cross country team all these years later. One who's
Wow.
come out and done Sidewalk Talk a few times. Um, that they themselves helped keep it mine for a long, long time. Um, but when my family put pressure on me because maybe it would get me a free ride to college, or I really don't think I ever had it from my coaches, thankfully.
Hmm.
But that's when it would become really hard.
Hmm. I completely understand. So for do you feel like you are heard now?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no.
Wow.
I mean, I would think I'd be blowing smoke up your bum if I said time, right? But
Right?
here's the scoop. I mean, I think I've been married for 17 years, and I think you can really treat your partner like an old pair of shoes sometimes,
Yes.
right? But what he and I do really well is we repair really well, and we can reset, and I trust that about our relationship.
Tell me what that
Uh,
means to repair.
yeah. Well, he'll say something hurtful, or I'll say something hurtful, or one of us will get pissy with the other one and be mean, or one of us will be, I would say not very attentive and supportive, or not hold up your end of the chores even. And then resentment will start to build. And if you don't talk about it right away when the hurt has happened, then the resentment kind of builds over time. And then you start to avoid each other or not connect. And so usually one of us, I mean, always one of us says, hey, one thing he'll say is, what's the relationship temperature feeling like right now? And I'm like, ooh, yeah, it's kind of chilly, isn't it? Um, and then we'll come together and each talk about, here's what's going on for me. Here's what I'm needing to feel loved. I'm not the cleanest housekeeper, and I'm married to a German, and he does seem to fit the stereotypes. And he said something really sweet. He said, it's not that I'm trying to like be this macho guy that says, you need to clean the house. He said, it's that sometimes I feel like I don't matter to you when you
Wow.
thoughtlessly throw something somewhere. And that's the point that I just want you to understand. And then I can say, oh, I take responsibility for that. I'm really sorry. And I probably am going to be able to make about a 50% improvement
Yeah.
because it's so not in my DNA. I'm almost like a kid with ADD. I was kind of a feral kid. So I'm going to really effort because I love you. And I also don't want you to assume if I don't, that it's because I don't care about you.
Yeah. Wow.
It's that kind of meet in the middle.
So talk to me, if you can, about those connection points we make between our belief systems, where the fact that you throw your shirt, and I'm just using it because it's such a beautiful, easy example, the fact that you throw
Yeah.
your shirt on the floor or on the chair, and then, which probably in your mind doesn't have one iota to do with how much you care about or how much he matters. It's
Hmm.
just and the connection point that we make to an action like that, the significance we give that it doesn't, that means I don't matter to you.
Hmm.
Can you, because we think about connection as this, us talking to each other,
Hmm.
but there's so many connections we make in the thought patterns and the
That's right.
belief systems we have that
That's
really
right.
cause these connections to be harder than we are. And
Yeah.
and you're not only listening to people on the streets, you're listening to people as your practice.
Yeah.
And what light can you share, what can you unpack about how to, one, see those connections that we make between unconnected things, and to disconnect those connections? Like, we think when we're disconnected it's bad, but these are disconnections that would be brilliant to have, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And in some ways, this is where I even don't like my own field that I work in professionally, because sometimes I feel like psychology is trying to teach us to behave and just be nice.
Yeah.
Um, Look, I don't always think that thought process that says you don't I don't matter to you, right? I think part of intimacy and loving someone, and I say this a lot to my couples, and they're always shocked that it's coming out of my mouth because they're like, "You're kind of giving me permission to like be neurotic." I'm like, "Yeah, look, there is no objective reality in our human brain. There are only two subjective realities. And what intimacy is making space for me to say to you, Danny, tell me what your reality is. Because you and I might be both seeing red, but your version of red and my version of red are two different things. And so, for example, back to your point with your daughter, I you'll have people come into my office or people talk to me on the street and they'll say, I feel happy. Well, what the hell does happy mean? I
Right.
don't know what happy means.
Yeah.
Am I just going to settle for that? Happy to me is licking an ice cream cone. Happy to you might be having the day off work. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so those connections also have to be those faulty assumptions that we make in connection. I just embrace and accept that they're happening.
Yeah.
And my hope is that we're brave enough with each other to admit that we're doing it.
Yeah.
So I have an incredible amount of trust with my husband. So I know he loves me. So I don't have that many neurotic assumptions with him, but I sure do with a lot of other people. I mean, I have a few favorites that I kind of hang out with me. And as my own therapist said, he said, I think this is going to be like the gadfly that hangs around and it's going to go with you to the dirt, Tracy.
Wow.
And I think it's true. I think there are some neuroses that they're, no matter how much we work with them, they just kind of come up and nibble at us even when we're not expecting it.
Hmm. I did some work with a man by the name of Thich Nhat Hanh. He is
Oh
a,
yeah, one of my favorites.
okay. So um, I have a character in my book who's called the Trash Man, and I didn't realize, but in talking with him and hearing him speak, he spoke about this thing called compassionate listening.
Hmm.
And he said, you just want to hold the space for people to put everything that harms them, everything that they fear, everything that hurts them, everything that makes them unhappy. To just hold this space for them to put
Yeah.
everything in. For me, it's the trash can of the trash man. And the
Yeah.
trash man comes every week. You can put all that stuff in it. He can take it and put it in the truck and drive it away, or he can just give you another trash can to fill up until you're ready, because you don't have to give it up until you're ready. But the idea of emptying all of this stuff into this space, and even if you were to say to me, Danny, you're the reason why I'm feeling this way, I don't defend myself at that point or rationalize. I just say, please tell me more. Like, tell me more about what that feels like. And you
That's
just
right.
go on and you just empty it all into this trash can. And the compassionate moment of that moment is there will come a time where you feel differently, because all that burden, all that pain, all that suffering that you had inside of yourself is for a moment outside of yourself. It's in this container, and you don't have to walk with it anymore. And to give somebody the opportunity to just be free of that for just a moment. They can have it back if they want, but for just a moment, to say, how do you feel now? Is such an exquisite moment. And for me, that's the practice of listening.
Yeah.
To be able to get people to that place, not where I teach them anything or do anything, but I just hold the space for them to be able to empty all that pains them into it. And they know that I love them, and I trust them, and they can trust me. I won't hurt them with it, and give them that space. So what I love is your honesty. And I love that you don't, so many people want you to believe there's somebody other than they are. And you're just so beautifully transparent. So how does somebody with all these things going on in themselves set up on a street corner and set up a movement, an organization, a movement really around the world to just listen to people? What motivated you to do that?
Well, I didn't intend to set up a movement. Okay, so a couple things about me. I am well, you know what? I'm going to claim this for myself right
Good,
now. I'm
go
going to
for it.
say it out loud. I think I'm an artist on some weird level.
Hold it. If you're going to claim it, hold it. If you're going to claim it, I don't want you to say, I think I am.
I know,
I want
right?
you to
Didn't
say,
I just do
I
that?
am an artist.
I am an artist.
I love that.
I'm an artist.
I love that.
I'm a provocateur, and I'm for sure a provocateur. But an artist in the sense that I get these creative muses that grab hold of me, right? And whisper in my ear. And I'm learning as I age to not say yes to all the voices, because I get so many creative ideas all the time, and I could wear myself out. And so I have to constantly come back to my values and what I stand for and where I want to put my time and where I want to put my energy. But after the uptick in gun violence in the United States and the incredible increase, not the increase, but the visibility of police brutality of African Americans in the United States, I woke up to my own privilege. And then I got a little annoyed with my colleagues who were writing all these think pieces about racism. I'm like, that's not the way for me to explore this topic. And what began to stir in me as I thought, God, what is happening in our culture? Like, what is this about that we in this country are killing each other?
Yeah.
Like, I have to know. And then I got this crazy idea. I want to put my therapist chair on the sidewalk. And it didn't come as an intellectual idea. And it didn't come as an idea where I wanted to heal and save and do therapy for people. It felt like I wanted to sit there as a protest and say, what's happening here, folks? What's happening? What are we doing to one another behind it? So it wasn't quite so pristine as I want to hold space for you.
Right.
It was a little bit fed up.
So
on some
did
level.
you start it as a platform for you to be able to speak? And because it sounds like you're saying is you were fed up and you wanted to just say, what in the hell is going on here? and you wanted to have a venue to be able to express what you were thinking.
No. Yeah, no. In fact, that was exactly what I was learning is I'm like, as somebody who's white, I have so many different avenues to speak.
Yes.
And as somebody who has money and health insurance and a home, like I specifically didn't want to speak. I wanted to learn and I wanted to listen and I wanted to sit on a public sidewalk in people's way to also provoke and say, we are all human walking around treating each other like we're machines. There was a provocation that I was engaging in, and that's the artistry of it. I was trying to shit disturb a little bit and say, how have we set up our lives? Is this really how we should be set up as a community? Is this right?
So when you get the platform here to speak about it, that's beautiful. But when you set up your chair, you didn't have that platform to speak about it. So how did what you were saying now get translated by putting a chair on a sidewalk and another chair in
Well,
front of you?
yeah. Well, I asked for help, first of all. Um, we got, what is it? I think 16 of us came together in a room and we thought about it. We thought about liability. We thought about what could go wrong.
Right.
Most of us were therapists. We're like, well, what happens if somebody's suicidal or going to harm somebody else? So we really sat and just went through every possible scenario. And then we thought very deliberately about how we'd want to set it up. And we liked the provocation, even though it's incredibly inconvenient to lug around a bunch of chairs, of setting up a chair in the middle of the sidewalk
Yeah.
rather than just standing there holding a sign, because it sort of, to be a little psychobabble here, some say Freud's greatest intervention was that he had clients lay on the couch, because in a Victorian era, you would never be in the room with another person laying down. That's just not
Yeah.
the posture you would take. There is as much about the sitting down process, or at least if the person doesn't sit down, seeing the chair, that's a provocation that says, can we slow down here together?
Love it.
Does that make
And
sense?
yeah, so much sense. You have no idea. I mean, to me, it touches every fiber of my being. I love that provocation. I love the idea of the image of just somebody sitting in a busy street where people don't have time to sit and they're just racing. I love the statement that it makes. But I also know that because I'm thinking to do a similar type of trip, even in my own little town, which is a spiritually rich town.
Mm-hmm.
I called up the city and I said, I
Mm-hmm.
just want to sit in a chair and I want to talk to people. This was before I even knew you existed.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, you're going to need a permit for that. Like
Yeah.
you can't, that's solicitation. I said, what do you mean it's solicitation? I'm not asking him for anything. I literally want to just listen to him. What am I soliciting? They said,
Yeah.
well, that's solicitation. So you can't do that on public streets.
Yeah.
We will ask you to leave. You can
Yeah.
do it as long as you want to, but then someone's going to ask you to leave. And if you don't leave, they're going to take you to jail. And I said, do you actually hear what you're saying? You're making it illegal for me to sit in a place and just ask people to talk to me. That I just want to listen to what people are saying. They
Mm-hmm.
said, I know it sounds crazy, but we've got to do it. So I could sit in public places in public, like I could sit in parking lots as long as a store didn't mind me being in their parking lot. But I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't go downtown and sit on a busy street. How
What
did
town
you,
are you in, Danny?
I'm in a small town called Encinitas, California.
Oh, okay.
It's North County of San Diego.
Yeah.
So, and it's a progressive town. It's not like, I was
Mm-hmm.
so shocked because I
Mm-hmm.
was thinking I'm going to just test it here to see how I take it around. But,
Yeah.
and I thought if I have to get city permits everywhere, this is going to be crazy.
Yeah, no, it is kind of crazy. And we actually just had one of our Australia chapter leaders say, I've been working on a permit for 14 months and I'm giving up. I can't spend any more time trying to get a permit to sit on a sidewalk and listen to people. So it's a thing. It's a thing. Every city is different and different people have different ways of getting around it. Some of them find sponsors. right? Some of them pay for the permit every time, literally. We have several chapter leaders that pay for a permit every time.
Wow.
Um,
But they won't
I,
even issue a permit. They said we won't issue a permit because we don't allow you to solicit.
yeah,
So
some people just go out and decided to play dumb and go out and do it and not ask,
yeah,
get in trouble, wait and, see what happens. Some people go out under, so what we do here in Heidelberg now is it's difficult for me to get a permit because I don't speak German yet. So we're probably going to need to get a sponsor. But what we've been doing is we found a loophole, which is the busker loophole. So we go out as buskers. And so there's certain locations in the city where you can have buskers for 1 hour. So we only get to listen for 1 hour,
I got you.
which is kind of a bummer because that's a very short period of time. But then any folks that we've met, they're welcome to come join us and we go have tea after. So if we meet some talkers that want to keep talking, we'll all go have tea. So it's bending the rule. I mean, whatever rules we have, but yeah, I hear you. It's strange. I understand some aspects of it, especially here in Heidelberg, where it's a tourist town. They're like, there's a limit to how much we can give up the sidewalk space because we've got
Yes,
so many tourists.
yes,
But in other scenarios, like you're describing, it's like, well, you're kind of blocking human connection then.
100%. But
Hmm.
it's so inherent in our way of life that we don't connect. We don't even realize that how natural it is for us to block connection.
Yeah,
Let's turn a corner here.
let's do it.
In the conversations that you've had in the people that have listened to the people that have come to talk, is there a central theme to what most people are saying, or is it as diverse as it could ever be?
Yeah, I guess the thing that's been the most, people say, well, what's the most surprising? And what's the most surprising is that a lot more stories are positive than you would think.
Yeah.
I think that's the most surprising. Um, and I actually feel very protective of our talkers because there's this assumption that somebody that would sit down on a sidewalk and talk to a stranger has a problem.
Yes. That's not.
I'm like, no. And I think that that's what's kind of beautiful too, is that they know that we're sitting out there as equals. This is a Pema Chodron quote, actually, that compassion happens between equals.
Yes.
And so we're not providing mental health services or crisis intervention. We do bring a lot of low fee, no fee referral resources with us, which also does make us, great community service providers. And all of our volunteers are trained in some basic crisis intervention to know if we have had 2 instances where we've had to call the police.
Wow.
Um, but,
But 2 instances out of how many instances?
oh goodness, 12,000.
Yeah. So I mean, that's such a small percent when you think about it.
Yeah.
And yet most people would think it's dangerous to do. Why would you do it? But out of 12,000 conversations, there have been 2 incidences where you've had to call the police. That's nothing.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Right.
For sure.
And
Yeah.
so what is the thing people say most to you? Is like, let me go. Yeah. Let me just stay there.
I'll say the thing that they say the most is thank you for doing this.
And why?
It gives me a little bit more faith in humanity.
Why? Why
Well,
do you
I don't
think
know.
that gives them more faith in you? Why do they thank you? What is the act of listening giving them the faith in humanity for? What are they really saying underneath what they're saying?
Well, I can't totally know because I'm going to have my filter on, remember?
Right.
I'm going to be assuming, and it's going to be through my subjective reality. But what I'd like to believe they're saying is that I see the same disconnection problem that you're seeing,
Yeah.
and I'm really glad someone's doing something about it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a sweet story. It was one of the most profound. So we did a tour. We did a tour after the last presidential election through the South, and there were 8 of us. We listened in a different state every day, so we felt like rock stars because on day 5 we were like, what city are we in today?
That's right.
We couldn't remember. We're like, oh, this is so cool. This must be what rock stars feel like. But it was just 8 of us, all stinky and sweaty by the end because we each had one Sidewalk Talk t-shirt, no way to
Wow.
wash it. We were
Wow.
like, woo, we're smelling good. Um, but we were in Louisville, Kentucky. Louisville, got to say it right. Louisville,
Louisville.
Kentucky. And which was one of my favorite places actually that we visited, favorite places. And this woman was riding her bike and she saw us sitting out there and she gasped. And she pulled her bike over and she stopped and she started sobbing. And she said, I can't stop and talk, but I just need you to know how much this means to me to see you out here doing
Wow.
this. And then she got on her bike and went on her way. And it was just so beautiful. I had a very weird experience in Louisville too. I just very rarely happens, but for whatever reason on that bus tour, I was the teen magnet. Every teenager in the South wanted to talk to me because I don't get a lot of teens usually, but
Right.
it was really lovely to I just had such a great time listening to all these teenagers who told me lots of stories about how their parents don't listen to them. They said they work so much, they're too busy, they don't have time. They're completely, they have no clue what's going on in my life because they don't really ask, which I
So
thought was interesting.
one of the things that I had as my sort of hypothesis for my trip,
Yeah.
which is only a hypothesis until, like Mike Tyson said, you have a lot of theories until you go in the ring and get punched in the face for the first time. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's a hypothesis from sitting in my chair and just talking to people. But the hypothesis is that very few of us feel heard. Like when I was setting up this trip, my wife looked over to me and was saying something to me, and I was too caught in what I was doing. And she said, "You didn't hear a word I said, did you?" And she said, "I really don't feel heard by you right now." And I went, "Wow, you're my wife." She said, "Yeah, you're going out to do all this listening, and you can't even listen to me right now."
Yeah.
And my stepson, who's brilliant, is a circle that they try and put in a square hole.
Mm.
And he said, "I don't want to do it."
You mean at school or something?
Yeah, at school. And he said,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to do my homework because they don't give a darn about me. They're not trying to understand me. They're just trying to put
Mm-hmm.
me into this peg. So I don't
That's right.
care about them. They're not listening to me. I
Mm-hmm.
work with CEOs of companies and they say to me, "Danny, we can't really tell people what we feel because we need to have a certain distance from them. And if we don't maintain that distance, they won't fear us enough to do what we want them to do." And I just listen to them and I say, "That's interesting." I talk to
Mm-hmm.
the people that work in those companies and I say, "Do you get to say what you want to say?" And
Mm-hmm.
they say, "No, because if we say what we want to say, someone on the team who we don't trust will use it to put get a step above us and try and put us down."
Mm-hmm.
So the hypothesis that's built into my head is that nobody's really saying what it is they want to say. So like my daughter, who's trying to say something but doesn't get heard, we're just saying the things that will get us attention at a certain point, but that's not what we want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, the question I have is, and I'll ask it to you: what would you want to say if you knew you would be heard?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say not to get attention or to sit and be provocative or to do anything? What would you want to say if I were sitting right down here with you right now and you knew the world was going to hear you and you were
Mm-hmm.
going to be heard for maybe the first time in your life? What would you say?
It's a hard and easy question because I guess I do feel heard a lot, right? I feel like I do have those sacred relationships where I feel heard. And it also depends on the moment. So if I were to feel into what I'm feeling right in this moment, what would I want to say? In this moment, what I want to say is, I feel really scared about the state of the world. Do you think it's going to be okay?
Yeah.
But you ask me in an hour and I have to pee really bad. Do you know where a bathroom is? I mean, and I don't even say that in a funny way, but
Right.
it
No, I
just,
understand.
it's evolving. But here's what I liked about what you'd said, because I guess. I'd like it if I disagreed too, I swear. But it's been my experience, both as somebody being listened to and listening to somebody else, that the quality of the listening And people talk a lot about listening skills, and I wish people would talk more about the posture that the listener needs to have. The what Thich Nhat Hanh talks about.
Yeah.
It's the internal presence and the non-judgment, which I don't bring everywhere in my life, but I think I do it more because I've been practicing so much.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual practice. It really is. When somebody talking feels that you're giving them that kind of listening,
Yes.
then they're no longer speaking the attention-seeking speaking.
Yeah.
They're no
Because they don't
longer
have to.
doing the attention-seeking speech. And so what's been the coolest thing, and for some of the Sidewalk Talk volunteers that have stuck around a long time, they're like, oh my God, because they've developed their practice to such a degree that they're on the receiving end of a depth and authenticity
Yeah.
that's so meaningful. So you've got to remember too that this is not about a service for the talker. This is as equally as potent for the listener.
Yes.
That when we get to be on it's such an honor, but it took a level of skill in the listening. And what I often, my little quote that I say is, when we listen, when we truly hear someone, we bring the best parts of them forward.
Yeah.
And how wonderful that a person gets to be in connection with another human being where, I mean, this is what parents are doing. Hopefully you're creating this beautiful foundation for, or a rich, fertile soil for your child to blossom
Yeah.
into the suchness of who they are. And good listening does the same thing. I watch people blossom in front of me.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I get to take that energy home. I mean, sometimes I'll get the emotional dump, but because I'm showing up with a particular kind of energy, you don't get into that same kind of codependent, I'm going to take on all your feelings for you. That just doesn't happen as much,
Yeah.
because they can already feel that you're not in that posture where you need them to be any different, that you're not going to give them advice and you're not going to fix it.
Yeah.
So it just gets deeper and deeper.
I had a beautiful friend who I really am only getting to know, but I was on her podcast, but I was introduced to her through another friend of mine, and she had done a trip similar to what I'd wanted to do several years back. And I asked her, what would be one piece of advice you would give
Mm.
to me as I head out on this trip? And she said, it's really very simple. You have to know that everything that you encounter is a reflection of you speaking to you about you.
Mm.
And I went, whoa. It was like I sort of know that thing, but when she said it was like, whoa, like what just kicked in
Sounds
there?
very Jungian to me.
It's very Jungian, right?
Yeah.
Because part of what I want to do is I want to be able to sit with people in the Ku Klux Klan and listen to their hatred and
Mm-hmm.
allow it to uncover those buried places of hatred in me. And it might not be around race, but it might be this hatred that lives inside of me that I can't stand, that
Mm-hmm.
I've buried so deeply inside of me that I never want to see it again. But in
Mm-hmm.
speaking with them, the reason why I hate so much the message that they're saying is because it lives in
Mm-hmm.
me. In my book, that's the work of the gardener. He said,
Mm-hmm.
if you have weeds in your garden, every time you see a weed, it's going to make you think of your garden, and
That's
you're
right.
going to want to pull your weed out. So
Mm. It's such a humble way to approach, though, the hard things that we see humanity doing, is to look at how it's reflected in ourselves. And I don't think a lot of us want to do that. We want to, and this is the issue with homelessness as well. I have often felt like homeless, and I'm going to join your friend in her Jungian
yeah,
nature. I feel like homeless folks are really representations of our shadow selves that we've cast about and disowned,
yes,
and they're holding them for us. And the reason, aside from the policies that we pass and the way that we value human life, I think we pass those policies and value human life in a particular way because we keep asking people and casting people out to hold shadow pieces of ourselves that we're unwilling to take a look at, because we need to be perceived as good people.
Yeah.
And I believe that we're good people when we're integrated people, where we know our shadow and our light. To me, that's a good person. I get very skeptical of people that are a little too good, to be honest. I do. So when I love my new favorite, I was just talking to a client today. I said to her, I said, you know what I'm really good at? And she said, what? I said, making mistakes.
Yeah, I love that. Right.
And I said, and if I could teach every client, because we were talking about a mistake that they'd made, how to just be comfortable making mistakes, that would be really a way to reduce some burdens.
Yeah. A lot for me has happened through the paradigm shift of the model of a vertical reality turning into a mosaic reality.
Mm-hmm.
In a vertical reality, we help people, we teach people, we show people,
Right.
broken people come to us to get fixed. In a mosaic reality, everybody's the same. We're all just pieces. We're different colors, and we come to simply by our coming together, we make all of us better. We make an artistry that is gorgeous, that we can't make on our own.
That's right.
If you were to look at, well, not if you were, if you looked out the window at the world that exists now, and this is, I want to be, I'll value your time because you're in Germany and it's much later than it is here.
I'm okay.
But if you look out the window at the world that you see, is this the world that you always dreamed of giving over to your children and your children's children?
Oh boy. Well, there's two things that I really love about that question. One of my favorite things that I think anybody asks me to do that I wish we all did is be more intentional about the world we'd like to see.
Yes,
Because how in the heck can we build it if we don't start envisioning it
exactly.
and then getting intentional about how we live our lives, right? So
You
I
jumped
at
to
first,
the second part of the
oh,
question.
did I? Well, and I have to cop to something. I got to be honest. I don't think I lived a very intentional life for a lot of years.
Yeah,
So I don't know that I actually did a good job of envisioning the world I wanted to see. I think I expected things to just continue on as they were, and I was pretty blind to a lot of the problems.
yeah,
I was kind of seduced by this idea of pleasure and avoiding pain, and that's kind of what I wanted to be doing.
yeah. So what happened to shift that? Because that's a pretty seductive way to live life.
Yeah. Well, I think it bumped up against something that, in spite of my childhood, I don't know why I was so concerned about this, but I was like this even as a kid when it was really uncool to be like this. I was always an upstander,
What does that mean?
which means that if somebody were being bullied, I would stand between
Stand
the
up for
person
them.
being bullied. Yeah, and I would do really risky things to stand up for them.
Yeah,
Like, really, I would go confront football players and say, "You leave that kid alone." I remember grabbing this one football player in high school and shoving him up against the locker. We had this young Taiwanese guy that had been transferred in, and he would get beat up by this guy, and his locker was below me, and we just became buddies. I said, "Don't go to your locker alone anymore. I'll go with you every time." And you know, and I was like that all the time. I just did that, and my friend Susanna, who I ran cross country with, she's like that too, and we're both still like that. Like, we
yeah,
both are speaker uppers. And so when I became educated about injustice, I had to take a look at how I was contributing to it.
hmm,
And it was no longer okay for me to remain blind to that. And so I had to grow up and grow out of this self-interested way of viewing the world. And even looking at psychology, frankly, I've had my own wrestling match with psychology lately, which is, are we just kind of dusting people off and sending them back to work? That's what we're doing. We're trying to put Band-Aids on them so that they can go back and so I get a little worried about, and that's not all. I mean, I don't want your listeners that have struggled with real mental health stuff to
right.
go,
No,
well, that's not
no,
true.
yeah,
But I think sometimes it is,
yeah.
right?
So,
Moreover, it leaves out some really wise ways of healing that are not Western European, that are really helpful.
yeah. Well, I think anytime and I don't say psychology does this, I say anytime anything does this,
Hmm.
where we don't allow ourselves to go into the pain capture it, put it into that container that we were talking about from Thich Nhat Hanh, and let it be taken away, it remains there. And so we can have the most beautiful new nectar come into our life, or have the most beautiful glass of water. I say to our kids all the time, you always have to tell the truth, because once you tell one lie, it's like a drop of poison you put into this beautiful fresh glass of water. No matter how fresh the water is, now it has a drop of poison and it's still going to kill you. It doesn't matter if it came from a spring or from a filtered system or from the tap. It still has the poison in it, and it'll kill you. So you never want to fill up your glass with the stuff that we've had. That why would you pour nectar into a room that's full of, pardon the language, shit of stuff that you haven't taken out, right? And so what would be one thing you would say to people to do today, right now, right after they finish listening, that would be intentional to create the world that would help create the world that they would like to see?
I only can pick one.
You can only pick one.
Okay, so this was what I'd pick. And I can say this and want it for myself as well. So I offer this advice to myself as well. It would be to go sit in a chair and close your eyes and put your loving, sweet hand on your own heart and say, "Oh, sweetheart, what do you need right now?"
I love that.
And then you'll be motivated to meet other people in the same way.
Totally. Traci, if people have fallen in love with you as much as I have through this podcast, and they want to get to know you and they want to find out more about what you're doing, what are the ways they can find you?
Well, I think the best way is to head on over to the Sidewalk Talk webpage, right? Because I think I write a weekly blog there. The blog is a little more provocative and we have a podcast too. I think the podcast is a little more genteel. I get a little feisty in the blog. And there's certainly some interviews. I'm sure we'll put this one up there somewhere, so you'll be able to find this. And then, of course, my therapy website, but that's talking a lot more about, I tell people I've been a couples therapist since I was 4, so I do offer a lot of good stuff for couples because I am motivated to serve couples who do want to have lasting relationships, and I'm proud of that work too.
And tell us what that site is.
Oh, that site is just my name. It's
TraciRuble.com.
TraciRuble.com, TraciRuble. And I do try to give I'm trying to build some free stuff because I am I am motivated for couples to survive and thrive. And I don't think our current social context is particularly great for couples either. We're not really supporting them. So I just want to say my little plug on couples. Marriage is hard. There's a lot of things conspiring against it in the society. So don't blame yourself. Be a little easier on yourself. I need to say that because I feel really bad when couples come in feeling ashamed.
Yeah. I want to say from the bottom of my heart what a pleasure it was to have you on here. And if I could take just a minute and just summarize this conversation from my perspective, I really want to invite our listeners to listen. I really want to invite you to go back and play this again because Traci said a lot of little gems in here that got caught in sentences or paragraphs that are easy to just pass over. One of the things that she said that sort of could have slipped by is that how important it is to listen to yourself. Like listening, we think starts with a conversation with somebody else. But I can't tell you how many people I come in contact with who are wondering why they don't have good interactions with people or good connections with people. But in a little bit of exploration, they have no interaction with themselves. They don't hear what their voice inside them is saying. They fill themselves up with so much activity and so much noise and so much confusion that they can't even hear what their inner voice is saying to them. And then they wonder, why is it so hard to listen to anybody else? There are people, and we've all seen them, that walk into a room and you know how comfortable they are in their own skin. And when they show up, they could be beautiful, they could be ugly, they could be fat, they could be thin, they could be old, they could be young, they could be white, yellow, red, or blue. It doesn't matter. Everybody, when they see somebody who's comfortable in their self, wants to be around that person. I remember meeting up with an old friend of mine. And it was at a time when I was in a family that was very, very, very wealthy. And so many of my friends were children of billionaires. And now this was 30 years later, and I had seen him after not having seen him for a long time. He now was a billionaire too. And he would ride me all through the time because he saw how smart I was, and he saw how capable I was, and he saw how much people just enjoyed being with me. And he would say, you got to get into the business world. Why are you spending so much time finding yourself and doing all this? And he would make fun of me for doing it. He said, aren't you done finding yourself? Aren't you ready to get out and do something in the world? And I'd say, no, not yet. And I was at the Mandarin Oriental in New York, and I was coming home at 11 o'clock. And I didn't know he was there. I hadn't seen him in 30 years. He was walking into the elevator that I was getting out of. He didn't recognize me, but I recognized him. I said, Neil? And he said, Danny, what are you doing? I said, well, I was just going back to my room. He said, I'm going to a club. Why don't you come with me? I said, I don't think so, but it's nice to see you. He said, well, I said, why don't we just sit here and have a drink? He said, I've got a great bottle of scotch and some good cigars. I'll go to my room. I'll meet you here in the lobby in 10 minutes. I said, great. We sat from 11 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the morning, just catching up. And one of the things that he said to me really, it stayed with me now for over 10 years. He said, I used to make fun of you. I used to think that you were lost and just this confused kid. When I saw you coming out of that elevator and I realized it was you, he said, I wished I had lived my life like you had lived your life. I'm on my 6th marriage. My kids don't talk to me. I have all the money in the world, but my business doesn't mean anything to me. I have affairs every single night with another woman because I'm just so lonely and I don't have any idea who I am. And I said, buddy, it's not too late to start. You can start right today. And he said, I want to do that. I want to do that. And then we left and I've never heard from him. And people have that option. But when we get to know ourselves, the beautiful thing about this coronavirus is it's put everything at halt. And people are having to sit in isolation and get a sense of who am I when I can't fill myself up with all the stuff that I fill myself up with. Take the opportunity of this moment. And when you can, and when you're ready, the work that Traci's doing on sidewalk-talk.org is no longer on the streets right now, but it's like we're doing right now in a virtual reality. You can do it through conversations like this. So please, please sign up to be one of those people that just learns to listen, because if everything in this world is a reflection of you talking to you about you, what might you hear about yourself that you never knew before in listening to somebody else? Thank you again, Traci Ruble, for the honor of your presence here and the gift of your time on Mosaic Podcast.
Thanks, Danny. You too.
And for those of you who listen all the time, I hope you will find this on Apple Podcasts. I hope you will like it. I hope you'll review it. Not so much for us, but if you like this experience, share it with your friends, because there are conversations that are happening here that are really real and beautiful. And I hope you'll share it with your friends. I hope you will become a part of this movement of listening, whether it's through the sidewalk-talk.org or it's through the Mosaic online. I really don't care. Just let's start listening to people and create a revolution where we listen more than we speak. Until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.